This episode of the Great Girlfriends podcast is being brought to you by Healthy Women and the Allergen Foundation. Welcome to the Great Girlfriends podcast, where we discuss life, love, laughter, and everything in between. I'm your host, Sibylla Muti, and happy Wednesday, Great Girlfriends. I am back again with my partners from Healthy Women and the Allergen Foundation, and so super excited because I get to bring a amazing guests from the medical community on board to share with us resources to really help our health journey. And so this week we're talking about migraines. We're talking about head health, which I consider really head health. And I have here today Rashmi Halker Singh, who is a doctor and associate professor of neurology at the Mayo Clinic. Hi, Dr. Rashmi. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Or do you prefer that I call you Dr. Singh, which is best for you?
Whatever you like is fine.
I personalize it like you're my friend. Hi, Dr. Rashmi. How are you?
I love it. That's great.
If you're okay, I'd like to read a little bit about this fantastic bio so that the listener can really get a sense of who you are and the type of information that they'll be receiving today. Does that work for you?
Go for it.
Awesome. Okay. So Dr. Rashmi Halker Singh is an associate professor of neurology at the Mayo Clinic. She completed her neurology residency and headache medicine fellowship at Mayo Clinic before joining faculty. Her academic interests include migraine and other primary headache disorders. Dr. Halker Singh is the Headache Fellowship Program Director at Mayo Clinic and the co-director of the Mayo Clinic Headache Symposium. She is also very involved with the American Headache Society, where she is the immediate past chair of the Women's Health Special Interest Group, is a member of the annual Scottsdale Headache Symposium Planning Committee, the Electronic Media Committee, the Emerging Leaders Program Committee, and is a co-director of the AHS REACH program. She is also the online and social media editor of the Headache Journal, the official publication of the American Headache Society, and is also an editorial board member of the American Migraine Foundation. She is also interested in building professional communities virtually and is a moderator of the Women Neurologist Group and an admin of the Migraine Mavens social media network. Dr. Halker Singh is a fellow of both the American Headache Society and the American Academy of Neurology. Wow. That's all I can say.
Thank you so much for having me on your show.
I am in awe. How you do what you do, I can't even imagine. There's committee upon committee. There's lots of learning. There's lots of growing. But I see that you are very passionate about headache disorders.
Yes, I love what I do. I'm very passionate about migraine. I'm very passionate about women in medicine. And I'm really excited to talk to you all about that and, share what I know about migraine and how, we can improve the lives of women in our community.
Incredible. So I've learned a ton about migraine since I've partnered with Healthy Women. And I'm beginning to understand more and more and more that headache disorders are far more common than we realize. That a lot of people have normalized certain pain and have not even been treated for the pain. And so what you do is incredibly special as women, busy women, really start to take more intention around their health care and become personal advocates for, a better quality of life. I'd love to know how you landed in this career in headache disorders.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I love the brain. I went to college. I was a neuroscience major at the University of Pennsylvania, and I fell in love with the brain and how it works. And I also really love taking care of people. So that was a great merger, I guess, being a neurologist. Mm-hmm. And in my neurology training, I had a really great mentor. I think for a lot of us, we go into what we do or find our passion because of great teachers. And that's really my story as well. I had a really, I was blessed and fortunate to have a really great mentor. He's Dr. David Dodick. He's also at the Mayo Clinic for some of you who might be familiar with his name. And he's my mentor, and he showed me, really, I think, was the one who introduced me to headache medicine. And I became interested in headache medicine because there is so much that we can do for patients, so much we can do for people. And I really love taking care of people who have, migraine and other headache disorders.
Mm-hmm.
I think, no, go ahead.
I was just going to say, there's a ton of myths about migraines in that, it's just another headache. Over the counter medicine is manageable for most people, that people are exaggerating the pain associated with it. And I really wanted for us today to kind of debunk a lot of that so that, for those of us who don't deal with migraines, but know people that do, we can be more empathetic. And then for those who have really normalized what could be an underlying condition, they can really get the help they need to kind of manage and navigate their health journey differently.
Yes, and that is something I'm so passionate about, and one of the things I love to talk about in my role as a headache physician. Because, migraine is so much more than just a headache. It's incredibly common. There was a recent study published, which some of you might be aware of, called the Global Burden of Disease, which named migraine as the leading cause of years lived with disability in women under the age of 50.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
There are over 1 billion people in the world who live with migraine, and in women under the age of 50, it is the leading cause of years lived with disability. So, just thinking about that for a minute,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So this is our most productive years. I hope to think, but
yeah.
We, I think as women, we do so much. We try to take on so much, and we still persevere even when we're not at our best.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And if we're suffering with a migraine attack, we might still push through it, but imagine how much more we would be able to accomplish on that day if we were not having to also have that burden on our shoulders.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the disability I'm talking about. And I think, one of the myths that sometimes people will come to me with, because I'm making a diagnosis of migraine every single day in my clinic, which is kind of astounding when you think about the fact that migraine is so common.
Mm.
And people, like every day, yesterday I saw so many patients, and yesterday I told so many people, so many women that, what you're having is migraine. And people are often surprised because they have an image of what migraine is.
Absolutely.
They think of, right? Like they think of like somebody who, they just have this image of migraine. And the thing is, first of all, migraine is not only a headache. Headache is a very common symptom of migraine, but it's not the only symptom.
Mm-hmm.
And also, sometimes people will tell me, well, I always thought to have a migraine, I need to be throwing up, or I need to be really under the covers, and I can't, I actually can go to work. I have this pain, but I can go. I can, I can pick up my kids from school.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's still migraine. There are clinical features of migraine, and it's a heterogeneous disease, meaning it doesn't have to manifest the same way every single time in a person, or two different people can have migraine and it can look a little bit differently.
Mm. Wow, you were already kind of busting through some of the myths that I had and didn't realize were myths. I want to talk about that. So, we typically think that it's associated with headaches, and now I'm hearing you say that that's just one symptom, but it's not a true indicator. It can look very different.
Yes.
So, what are some of those differences?
So, headache is one symptom of migraine, but we know that migraine is a genetic problem and it's a neurologic disease. And I can't emphasize that enough, because for another reason, because people will come to me and, something else people will say is, there must be something causing my headache and I can't figure it out. And they might carry a lot of guilt about it. And I tell my patients, what this is it's a neurologic disease, and you may or may not be able to identify your triggers, but at the end of the day, what's causing it is your genetic makeup.
Wow.
And So I don't, I want to take away some of that guilt that some people might have about why they have their migraine.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just a headache. It's so much more than that. It's neurologic dysfunction that for a lot of people can come and go. It's a problem of pain pathways within the brain that commonly manifests with pain. But, if you're someone who might have migraine, or maybe you don't think you have migraine, but you have severe headaches, and you can kind of think about other symptoms that might go along with it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, people who have a diagnosis of migraine may also have nausea. They might also have some sensitivity to light and sound.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they might have quite a bit of fatigue or confusion with their attacks as well. Sometimes before a headache comes on, they might see some, changes in their vision. And sometimes after the whole thing ends, some of my patients talk to me about what we, in a medical term would call the postdrome. Sometimes patients refer to it as like the migraine hangover, where their brain is still kind of recovering from the whole attack. And this can last even up to a day or so.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Wow, wow, wow. And so headache is only one piece of the story. It's not the full pie. But for some people, I mean, I think it's easy for us to say, or to normalize pain and say, hey, I've got to keep going. So I'll just treat this with an over-the-counter medication and hope that it'll pass. But I'm learning that it's not that simple.
Yeah, and Sybil, just to add one more point to that, even scientists are recognizing that migraine is not just a headache now, because with our clinical trials with new medications, typically something becomes FDA approved to treat migraine because it meets a primary endpoint in a clinical trial, right? And that primary endpoint is typically a pain-related endpoint. So this medication has to demonstrate that it treats pain. So I'll make up something. Like, let's say this medication has to demonstrate that it will, you'll be headache free in 2 hours. Well, now, because we're also recognizing that migraine is much more than only pain, there's often a second primary endpoint in these clinical trials. So it has to show maybe that it'll treat pain, but there might be another endpoint, which is most bothersome symptom. So this is a patient-centric endpoint, meaning this will be individualized for the patient. So maybe pain is not what is most bothersome to a person with their migraine attack. It could be nausea, it could be light sensitivity, it could be sound sensitivity. And does this medicine get rid of that symptom? And that's defined by the patient for what they feel is most bothersome. So again, it kind of takes into account the fact that the whole medical community is recognizing that migraine is much more than only pain.
Interesting. I asked some questions in our Facebook community about people with migraines and some of the things that they were taught or assumed. And so many women assumed that migraines were associated with their menstrual cycle.
Yeah.
Is there any truth to that association?
Absolutely, which is also why it's much more common in women than in men. It's much more prevalent in women. About a third of women will begin to experience migraine around the time of puberty. And about 2/3 of women do have a hormonal relationship with their migraine attacks. And we have a very specific definition as to what that hormonal relationship is. By definition, when we talk about a hormonal relationship, you need to have a migraine attack occur either 2 days before your period begins up to 2 days after your period begins. So that 5-day window is what we're talking about. And it has to happen at least 2 out of 3 cycles. So the majority of the time. And the reason that it happened, like the scientific explanation, is because of estrogen fluctuations. So when you have your menstrual cycle, there's a drop in estrogen. And for women who are sensitive to that from a migraine standpoint, that drop in estrogen can also be a migraine trigger. So your estrogen drops, you get a period, you have your period, your estrogen drops, it can also trigger a migraine attack, which is also why many women, when they get pregnant, can see an improvement in their migraine attacks, especially in the second and third trimester when estrogen levels have to remain stable and stop fluctuating to maintain that pregnancy.
Quite interesting. My goodness, there's so much about the body that, I feel like the more you live, the more you learn about your body because conditions progress, learnings progress, the needs and desires progress. There's also, and so I hear you saying that, but light sensitivity is something that has come up continually in conversation about, where migraines are concerned. And I'm hearing that is a symptom or an indicator, but not necessarily a cause, because cause and indicator are different. And you indicated that it's a genetic trigger a genetic trait more so than something that you can develop over time through environment.
So migraine is that's a great question. So actually he brought up several great points. I'm so excited to talk about all of this. So first of all, migraine is a genetic disease. Mm-hmm. Secondly, epidemiology studies have shown us that migraine frequency can fluctuate throughout someone's lifetime, and that can be due to a number of different reasons. Mm-hmm. Thirdly, for a lot of women, hormones do play a role, which is why, a lot of women might first begin experience migraines around puberty. Mm-hmm. And for a lot of women, that, their migraine attacks can worsen around perimenopause, because at that point, when you start going through the change and your menstrual cycle becomes a little bit more irregular and your estrogen levels fluctuate a bit more frequently, you might see an increase in your migraine attack frequency as well. But then after you complete menopause, a lot of women do see an improvement in their migraine attack frequency also. So it's a genetic problem, but there can be a lot of different things that influence their attack frequency. And then finally, you brought up a really interesting question about light sensitivity. Well, about 10 years ago, the scientific community actually identified a whole pathway in the brain that's responsible for why bright lights cause pain for people who have migraine. So that was actually an interesting, discovery. There's a whole pathway that's responsible for that.
Wow. And that's very important. And there's also the idea, another trigger or symptom that came up or indicator was weather. So rain. A lot of people felt that rain is one of those, when the weather changes, that they feel like they have a heightened chance of having migraines.
Yeah, I was talking to our local news station about this over the weekend, and it's interesting because I have a daughter. She's 14, mm-hmm. and when she was about 10 years old, we were driving in the car one day. It was raining, and she looked at me and said, "Mom, I hate it when it rains." And I asked her why, and she said, "Every time it rains, my head hurts so much." She has migraine, mm-hmm. And so she's one of these people who have this weather, who feels that she has a weather trigger, like so many of my patients do. Mm-hmm. The complicated thing here, though, is that we actually don't have a good handle as to why weather is a trigger for migraine. Very difficult variable to isolate. Weather changes all the time. Mm-hmm. And, as human, we all have different things that we consider to be triggers for our migraine attacks also. And, mm-hmm. Let me tell you, this is not without trying, because there have been several looking into weather as a trigger. Studies have suggested that high barometric pressure changes can be a trigger. Some have suggested that low barometric pressure changes can be a trigger. And some studies have suggested that there's no correlation at all.
Wow.
So it's kind of like all over the map. Yeah. And I'm not exactly sure of that at the moment, except it's just a really complicated thing to study. And a lot of people feel that they have this weather correlation. And, I'm sure, there's something there to it. But I think it speaks to the fact that migraine is it's this complex problem. It's not the same thing for everybody. And I just don't think the science is there yet to really fully understand it.
Mm. I get it. That's very interesting that you say that, because one of the questions that I had for you were, what are the controls and the variables associated with migraines? I'm hearing you say that though DNA or genetic makeup is a key control or indicator, the body has very different ways of kind of identifying or showing the disease publicly.
Yes, and actually there are so many different, genetic, loci identified. We have lots of different, genetic targets involved with migraine. And every meeting I go to, there's like a new target that's being spoken about. And it's not so simple. It's not just, like this like autosomal dominant disease. If you have gene X, that means you're going to, have the disease. It's a lot more complex than that, which is why I think, some people have a hormonal link. Not everybody does. Some people have, different triggers. It's a very, it's not the same disease for everybody.
Got it. And is there a way that you can see or predetermine, with your doctor if you are on the track to eventually have migraines? Is there a way that you can be preventative in the approach, or is it more reactive?
So that would be a great tool. We're not quite there yet.
Okay.
At the moment, we are. I think maybe down the line with individualized medicine, that would be amazing. But science is not there yet. Right now, it still is this invisible disease, and that's the kind of the situation.
Because I'm just thinking in terms of as women do their annual checkups, and I think most people don't typically see a neurologist, though you will see one if there is something that leads you to a neurologist for care. How do you kind of, for a woman who's listening who wants to kind of communicate early symptoms or just check in and see what's happening, what she would do or what steps she would take to get the care as early as possible?
I'm so glad you asked this question. There was a study published not that long ago which found that only about a quarter of people who have what we call episodic migraine, which is when you have less than 15 headache days per month, do you even see a doctor, get the right diagnosis, and get placed on appropriate treatment for migraine. I mean, there is, first of all, just seeing a doctor. Secondly, even if you see the doctor, getting the right diagnosis of migraine, and thirdly, getting placed on the right treatment. I mean, just getting through all three of those hurdles and getting, it was kind of staggering to those of us who take care of people with migraine to see that there's such a hurdle.
Wow. There's this thing, I don't know, great girlfriends, you really got to think through this and be honest with yourself and what's happening in your body, where we suffer through so many things that we really could have care for if we just, attend differently. And I'm learning more and more. The data shows, that we don't do the best job of taking care of that vessel of our bodies, and that we weather so much through conditions and just kind of check it off as this is a part of life, when we could actually get really, really great care.
Well, Sybil, I want to chime in there and add that it's not just up to the patients, because even when patients presented to the doctor, getting the appropriate diagnosis and getting placed in appropriate treatment was also hurdles too.
Mm-hmm.
So, there was some problems on both sides.
Got it. Wow. So then let's talk solutions, because, a lot of people are afraid of trying different medications, or even, the trial of determining what's the best route of treatment. What have you learned, as far as patient care and how to, determine treatments, or for people who are considering treatments, how they can kind of, really get a sense of what the process would look like?
Yeah. So actually, even before you go to see a doctor, there's a lot that you can do for yourself. And my colleagues at Mayo Clinic and I love to use a mnemonic with our patients that we call seeds to success. So, and I'll go through that with you all. So with seeds to success, the first S stands for sleep. So for people who have frequent headaches, sleep is really important. And I'm talking about consistent sleep. So if you're not sleeping enough or having irregular sleep patterns, that can often be a common trigger for more frequent headache attacks. Also, if you have untreated sleep apnea or a sleep problem, it's a good idea to get that checked out too. And then E. So E stands for exercise. We all know that exercise is good for us for so many reasons, and It can also be helpful in reducing headache frequency. So that's important. Yes, yeah. Sometimes easier said than done, but we know it's important for our health.
That's right.
And then the next E stands for eating. So, skipping meals, not eating, not eating enough, getting hypoglycemic, that can all be a headache trigger. And then I also, if someone comes in to see me and they have frequent headaches or even daily headaches, I ask my patients about caffeine intake. So if someone's having a daily headache, I'll ask them, how much caffeine do you drink? Do you drink something caffeinated every single day? And if they say yes, my follow-up question to that is, if you skip your caffeinated beverage, your cup of coffee or whatever it is, will that trigger a headache? And if the answer is yes, then there's a good chance that the caffeine actually might be part of the problem. And you might want to think about trying to kind of taper off for a while. And when I say a while, I mean maybe a couple of months to see if you might feel better. And you might actually feel a little bit worse because sometimes it takes a little bit, you might go through a little bit of caffeine withdrawal in the beginning, but you can do this slowly. But it's something to think about. The D in seeds stands for keeping a diary, because sometimes people are not aware of how often they're getting headaches, because you might actually have more frequent headaches than you're aware of. Or maybe, aware of triggers. Maybe there is a hormonal relationship and you're not, paying attention to it. Or maybe you're not aware of how much medication you're using. Because we know that if you take as needed pain medicines, including over-the-counter medicines, more than 10 days per month, those medicines can actually lead to more frequent headaches over time. So it's a little ironic because you take something to get rid of the headache, but if you take it too often, it actually becomes part of the problem. And then the final S in seeds stands for stress management. So stress can be a big trigger for a lot of people too. So mindfulness, relaxation, yoga, all of that can be really good for you. And that's all stuff to think about even before you come in to see a doctor,
Yes, that's such good preventative care. And I have to tell you, 3 of those letters, I checked my own boxes of accountability where you may have heard me going, because I'm like, okay, Sybil, yep, check that. You need to be better at that. Sleep was the number one thing that I know I can do better at. And the other thing is the coffee. I know as of recent being, now a homeschool teacher and a work from, all the different titles we've all amassed. I found myself boosting my day with caffeine. And so a lot of the women in our Facebook community also mentioned that, with this new lifestyle that we all have, they're more easily triggered as well in their homes because their children are working and there's a lot more sound than they were experiencing in their original workday. Different sounds, right? So it's it's not office chatter, it's child chatter. And it hits different as a mom. Your mom, it's like
yes. And this is not easy. I tell my patients it's very easy for me to say all this, but I know this is not easy stuff to accomplish. But even if you're able to make small changes, I think sometimes that can lead to big accomplishments. So just something to think about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is my last question. I could speak to you all day because I'm learning so much. And great girlfriends, I know you're taking notes because there's just a lot that we can do. We can be better to ourselves. We can advocate differently. We can ask different questions with the doctors. We can be more intentional in our days. I'm hearing so much out of the messaging that you're giving. But what is one message that you would give to, every woman? We've got a community of women who are busy, they're on the go. They spend a lot of time at work and they do want to do better, with healthcare, but they may not always make those appointments and they're probably checking off a number of boxes on how to really manage life. What is one of those things that you tell your patients about really prioritizing self-care?
Well, I want, your listeners to have hope. because we have a community of healthcare providers that care about you, and we have strong advocates who are out there who care about people who have migraine, who are out there seeing people who are out there to take care of people who have migraine, who are out there doing research. We've developed new medications. We have new medications that have been FDA approved in the last couple of years. This is an exciting time in the whole headache community because we have new things to offer, and we're learning so much more about the whole disease. There is so much going on within the whole migraine community right now. So if you are somebody who has migraine or headache, if you're having headaches more than, say, once a week or even less than that, but they're disabling, come see us. We have a lot that we can offer, and we're here to help you. And so I just want you all to have hope.
Yeah. That is so important. I know I can't imagine to have to live with daily pain and debilitating pain, but having hope, I'm sure, is the assurance that we all need, that it doesn't have to be that way, And if you know
Exactly.
if you know that it can be better, and if you know that, different doctors are in place and specialists are in place to really help target solutions, by all means, take Dr. Singh's advice and seek out the right professional care, because those solutions will help improve your entire quality of life.
Well, thank you so much for having me on.
Yes, Dr. Singh, and thank you for taking out the time from your really incredibly full schedule, according to what I read in your bio. For all of our listeners who want to just maybe touch base or keep up with your work or your research, where can they follow you?
So I'm on Twitter. You can follow me on Twitter. It's at Rashmi Halker. It's a great way to follow me.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Singh. It's been a pleasure speaking with you. Thank you, Healthy Women, for having us even curate this beautiful conversation about migraine health or head health. And we just appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a lovely day.
You too. Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Great girlfriends, did you enjoy this week's episode of the podcast? If so, would you please give us your amazing review on iTunes? Every single review helps another great girlfriend get plugged into the podcast, into the community. Speaking of community, make sure you join our Facebook group, The Great Girlfriends. You follow us on Instagram at The Great Girlfriends and on Twitter at _Great GFS. Last but not least, we'd like to thank my amazing husband, Kwaku, Sam and Dilly, and all of you for being a part of the global community that makes us so strong. Please remember to share with your friends, keep listening, and keep being a great girlfriend. I'm Sybil Amuti, and I'm out. Peace.